Hello Year 1, it's Mr. Butcher here again. Hope you enjoyed my last video about castles. I think quite a lot of you watched it because Mrs. O'Byrne sent me a lot of your questions, which I've really enjoyed reading through. They're very, very good questions, all of them, and there's loads of them as well. I'm just looking at my computer here, there's fantastic questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read through some of these questions, and what I'll do is I'll try and answer them. I don't know if I'll be able to answer all of them, but I'll do my best to answer as many as I can because, I don't want to go on for hours and hours because I think you'll fall asleep. So what I'll do is I'll read through some questions and I'll try and answer them. So, first question that comes up, it says, how old are castles? Why were castles built? Now, that's a really good question. So, how old are castles? It depends. Some are very, very old, and over 1,000 years. Some castles are, but some are a little bit newer. But why were they built? Well, they're built for protection and safety, so that the people who built them and the people that lived near them could go into it if it was dangerous, so they could be quite safe. So that's why they were built. When was the first castle in England built? That was Norwich Castle. And it was built by a man called William the Conqueror, who came to England from France, or Normandy, but France. And he took over England and became the king. And he decided to build a lot of castles. His name was William the Conqueror. And he built quite a lot of castles. And famously, one of the biggest castles and the first castles he built was this one. You might recognise that. That is the Tower of London. Tower of London. Now, the Tower of London was one of the first built. It was not quite as old as Norwich Castle, but built in London to protect the entrance to London. And it's quite famous. You might have seen it maybe if you've been up to London. It's quite a cool castle. Really recommend it. Really recommend going there. So, how do they keep safe if someone breaks into the castle? Now, if someone broke into the castle, most of the time people just give up and say, oh, I surrender, and so they'll be okay. So if you do want to run away, you can maybe go into the keep, which is a slightly stronger part of the castle, and you'd hold up there in the keep. And who lived in castles? Well, lots of people lived in castles. Usually it was a lord and a lady, and whoever kind of lived or in charge of the local area would live in the castle, but also people that kind of worked for the lord and the lady. How long did it take castles made of stone to be built? It would take years, lots of years. So how old you are in year 1, so about 5, 6, it would take about that age, that long to build a stone castle, depending on how big it was. But it would take a long time. How did they flush the toilet in the castle? They didn't have toilets the way we do. Their toilets would be basically a hole in the roof over the water bit, and so you go to toilet, it just goes straight down. So that's how they would go to toilet in castles. How strong is a castle? I've got a really good question there. How strong is a castle? Very strong. It would take a lot of effort to try and get through because it's made of lots of bricks. So not just one brick, it's lots of bricks and very thick. Sometimes the walls would be, really, really thick, so you couldn't get through it very easily. And even if you battered it down, it'd be very, very hard to get down. Is it warm in the castle? No. In the winter, it'd be freezing. It'd be really cold. They didn't have central heating. I know someone else asked that question about central heating. No, you didn't have radiators. It was very cold in castles. You'd only get warmth from a fire, and a fire in a fireplace, and that would only be in a few rooms. You wouldn't have that everywhere. So it'd be very cold in the winter and probably quite hot in the summertime because obviously you wouldn't get much ventilation. Now, the windows, why they're narrow, really good question. The arrow slits. Now, therefore, if you're defending the castle, you can't really get much through that really narrow slit, the arrow slit. So it's really hard to get anything through it. But if you stood next to it, you could fire an arrow out of it at someone who's down on the floor. So you could fire things through it, but you couldn't be hit. You couldn't be hit by the arrow. So it was an arrow slit. So that's why they're very narrow. What are better towers, square or round? Round towers are better because if you fire something at it, if it's round, the thing might deflect off, it might fire off. Whereas if they're square, it's easier to fire things into it and it's harder to defend. There is a lot more reasons why round is better than square, but I won't go into too much detail. How do people have fun in the castle? Well, it was really cool. They used to have a clown called a jester. And his job or her job was to make people laugh and tell stories. So the court jester, and they were quite cool people. They'd go around, maybe wear funny clothes and make jokes and play music and sing songs. So that's how people had fun in castles. Fireballs, right. So fireballs are usually made of hay, coated with tar or oil or fat, and then set alight and thrown. That's how fireballs are made. Do all castles have water around them? No, not all castles have water around them. Someone asked, where's the best place to put a castle? The best place to put a castle is on the top of a hill. Because I don't know if you noticed, but walking up a hill, it's really hard. And if you're at the top of a hill, you know, I'm the king of the castle, you're the dirty rascal thing. If you're at the top of the hill, you've got a much better view of everyone. So it's really good to just stick on the top of a hill. Some castles didn't have water around them. Where else? What other questions do we have? How many men would it take to build a castle? A lot of men. It would take, you know, just having a hot chocolate year one, sorry. How many men? Hundreds, lots and lots and lots of people. Because you didn't have cranes the way we did. It would take years, it would take a long time, so it would take a lot of people. Can castles be made of metal? Now, when they built castles, there wasn't much metal. So obviously, you know, we have a lot of metal now, but they didn't have it back then. They couldn't make it. So the easiest thing to do was make rock and make it out of rock, because that's it. And also, a metal castle would be very heavy, and it probably wouldn't be quite as good. Now, did kings have different castles to others or not? Yes. The king would have specific castles that he would own, but quite a lot of other people, rich people, would own their own castles, which was a bit of a problem for the king if he didn't like them. But yes, the king would have their own castle, Windsor Castle being the most famous of them. But you know, there's quite a lot of the castles. Now, how were castles built? Very good question. You'd start at the bottom with bricks and rock, and you just build it up. You'd build it slowly, focusing on one part, maybe one tower. Then you build a wall or one part of the wall. Or you maybe start with a motte and bailey, which is just wood, and then just fortify it, make it better and stronger with more rock. Now, how many castles are there in the world? There are thousands. There are thousands and thousands of castles. The best place to see castles is actually in Wales. There are more castles in Wales per square mile, which I won't go into. There's loads of castles in Wales. There's lots of them. So if you want to go to see castles, go to Wales. Not now, but when we're allowed to, go and see them. Oldest castle in the world, I think that's in the Middle East. Apologies. The biggest castle in the world, that's in Poland, from my understanding. I forgot what it's called. Malbrook Castle in Poland. Why did people want to break into the castle? Well, because sometimes they didn't like the people in the castle, and also because there's lots of good things in the castle that they might want. So that's kind of most of the reasons why. How does a drawbridge work? So you'd have a bridge. Let's take my wallet. And that bit would go up and down. Now, obviously my hand is moving it up and down, but you'd have some chains, and the people on this side would pull the chain, you'd pull it, and then it'd go up with the chain pulling it down that way. That's how a drawbridge works, which is pretty cool. Do castles have people in them anymore? Yes, they do. Some people still live in castles. The Queen, obviously quite famous. some people own castles and live in them, but most of the time people are in castles because they're tourists. They like visiting them. But yes, some people still live in castles. Now, I love this question because I think it's really cool. What's my favourite castle? Now, my favourite castle is this one here. It's really cool. This is a castle in France. It's called Mont Saint-Michel. Now, what I like about this one is it's surrounded by water. It's in the middle of the sea, and when the tide goes up and back, you can walk to it via the sand. But then when the water comes back in, when the tide comes back in, it's surrounded by water. It's a really cool castle. I love it. It's really nice. It's in France. And my other one, which you might have seen before, because it's actually I'll explain this. Now, this is called Neuschwanstein. It's a really cool castle in Germany. That's Neuschwanstein. Now, that castle is pretty beautiful, isn't it? It looks really cool. That's up in the mountains, and it's really hard to get to. Really hard. You've got to walk up lots and lots of hills and mountains. But someone saw that castle, and that person's name was Walt Disney. And when they designed the Disney castle, it's modelled. And they made it because they saw that castle and they really liked it. So those are my favourite castles. I haven't got long left, sorry, year one. How deep are moats? Not very deep. So about as tall, or maybe double as tall as an adult, maybe. So 2 meters. Would they have fish in them? Sometimes, yeah. They'd have lots of frogs. I went to a castle recently called Hever Castle, and it had loads of fish in it. It's really cool because also fishing was good. You could eat the fish if you wanted to. How was it the first time? I think I've got most of them. Are any castles magical? You know what? My favourite castle, other than the 2 I showed you, Hogwarts, Harry Potter. I think some of them are magical. I really hope they are. But I've not been to one before, but I really wish they were. And there's not many wooden castles there anymore. And what castle in the world has the most visitors? That's, I think, Windsor Castle, but I'm not sure, but I think it's Windsor Castle. How many dungeons were there in the castle? They'd have about 5 or 6, depending on how big the castle was. And you wouldn't keep many people in them. But yes, you would have some people, you'd have them in there. How strong are the walls? I think they're very thick, so they're very, very strong. The Portcullis. Now, Portcullis is a metal kind of grate, and it comes down in front of the bridge, which is pretty cool. Do trees grow inside the castle? Yeah, they would grow trees because they'd sometimes need the trees. Are there ghosts in castles? I hope not. I've never seen one in a castle. I really hope there aren't because they're quite scary, but that'd be pretty cool as well, wouldn't it? Which part of the castle do king and queens live in? They live in the keep, the tallest bit, So, year one, I'm sorry if I didn't answer all your questions, but I hope you got some knowledge from them. It's been great speaking to you again, and I hope you've learned a lot about castles, and stay safe. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.